And I'm in this place that I never really even believed in. I called it heaven. And this strange figure appears, and this strange figure passes me a basketball. And immediately I recognized this figure. It was my stepdad. His name was Mike. And he says, I've been sent here to offer you something. I know how badly you wanted that second chance after your life review. Well, I've been here on behalf of a higher power to offer you that second chance. He said, you can stay here with me or you can go back.
Bubba, it's amazing to chat with you today. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. And let's kick it off with a huge experience you had in your life. Your life changed dramatically in 2019. Please describe, and we will get into exactly what happened, but please describe what your life was like before that, before everything changed that one day.
I was a baseball player. My whole life, I was a very gifted athlete. From the time I was 4 years old, all I wanted to do growing up was play in the major leagues. Major League Baseball was my dream as a kid. So before that day in 2019, that was the only thing I cared about. It was the only thing I did. I mean, my life was spent in dugouts and in locker rooms and in batting cages and even in grocery stores. I would always be, practicing my pitching or practicing my hitting. And so nothing else existed. That was my entire universe before this experience. So I would wake up before school and I would go and lift weights and I would, run laps and I would stay after practice. And I decided I was going to dedicate my life to becoming a Major League Baseball player. I was awarded a scholarship to a Division I baseball program. Division I in the United States here, for those who don't know, it's the highest level of amateur baseball that there is. So it's like one step underneath the professional leagues. So I didn't get drafted to professional leagues just yet, but I was well on my way to doing so. One day I had been carrying like this nagging shoulder and elbow injury. I didn't really tell many people about it because I was just tough. I was like, oh, I'll just tough through this whole thing. Eventually my body couldn't take the force that I was asking it to put out. And one day I was practicing this new pitch that I had just learned. And I felt this pop in my elbow. I tried to, brush it off, shake it off, but I threw one more pitch that day and I felt another pop and I just couldn't move my arm anymore. So it required surgery. And basically it's just an elbow kind of reconstruction. You can kind of see the scar there.
So let's talk about that day. It was in Jacksonville, Florida, in hospital. You thought you were going for a routine surgery. What happened?
Yeah. So I go in for surgery and I'm not a happy camper. First of all, it's 5 a.m. and I was 19 and I just didn't want to be up and getting cut into that early in the morning. I get up in my hospital gear and my hospital gown and I'm hooked up to all these machines with the IVs. And the doctor comes in and gives me the rundown before my surgery. And he says, Bubba, we're going to put anesthesia through your IV. When we do so, we're going to dismiss your mom. And he says, by the time we get to the operating room, you're going to be unconscious and under the anesthesia. You're not going to feel a thing. And the surgery is going to last 1 hour. We're going to send you on your way back home. So that was my impression going into surgery. So I told my mom, I'll see you in an hour. I love you. I'll see you soon. And my mom's all nervous, of course, but this surgeon had done this surgery so many times and it was so popular that I never anticipated anything potentially going wrong. He does exactly what he says. He puts the anesthesia through my IV, wheels me to the operating room, just like he said. But Mark, when I got to the operating room, I was still awake, but I had my eyes closed and I was waiting for this anesthesia to hit me. And I really didn't know the difference. I didn't know what to expect because I've never had surgery before. So I figured that, this was just a part of the procedure. Maybe the anesthesia was going to hit me in just a moment. And, the doctors proceed and I'm waiting there with my eyes closed, still fully conscious and awake. And I wanted to say something, but like I said, I just figured this was part of the procedure. So I just lay there and they're getting ready to operate on me and I'm still fully conscious and awake. But now it doesn't feel like I could say anything. Like it just doesn't feel like I could say anything at this point. It just feels like, okay, whatever is about to happen is about to happen kind of thing. The doctors are getting ready to cut into me. And as they're, inching closer, they pull back and the energy in the room shifted. And the next thing I knew, Mark, was I was just watching the entire experience unfold from above. It was as if I was watching something happening on the first floor of a house, and I was on the second floor of the house, and there was just like the floor was glass. You could see through the floor, and that's kind of how it felt. And I watched from above as my body turned I always call it like a lifeless kind of blue. That seemed like the only way to describe the color. And then like a corpse like white and brown. And I watched my heart stop on the operating table from an allergic reaction to the anesthesia. And immediately, as soon as I experienced all of that, I didn't spend much time on this proverbial second floor of the house. I was shuttled into this profound life review where I was engulfed by this 360-degree, panoramic type movie screen. And it was a movie of my life from start to finish. But it wasn't just a movie that you watched, Mark. It was like a movie that you were also in. And even beyond that, I know it sounds crazy, I guess, but it wasn't even just a movie that I was in, but it was a movie that I could experience from all perspectives of all characters involved. It was the strangest thing, but the life review was just incredibly profound, and it eventually led to me, dying full of regret over the life that I hadn't exactly lived.
Wow. Yeah, so much to dive into with this, and the thing that because I've read your full book now, and the thing that I found about the life review is that it really focused on the close relationships with the people you loved the most. Those relationships we have, they're the people we love the most, but they're also human, and so that life is tough. It's not a fairy tale quite a lot. So we see faults in people. We get hurt by the people closest to us. But what really amazed me by your experience that you're about to describe was how you had a whole new perspective. And like you mentioned there, you saw things through their eyes, and you saw maybe a background before that you didn't know about. So let's begin firstly with your dad. Talk us through the family dynamics, because I know your family had split up when you were younger.
My parents divorced when I was 8 years old. It was caused by an infidelity that my dad committed on my mom. It was super, super rough for our family because my mom was a single mom at the time, and she didn't work. She didn't have an income. She didn't have a job. So when my parents split up, it forced my mom to really step up. And at the time we were in a foreclosing house, so we ended up living in these really low income housing apartments. It was just a very tough situation. But to your question about uh, my life review and my relationship with my dad, in my life review, my dad was a good man. He was a good-hearted guy, but he was one of those guys that had a really, really rough upbringing himself. He grew up in poverty, just like I grew up, and he grew up medicated very young for ADHD, and ridiculed and bullied and beat with belts and hangers and things like that. So he was a guy that was full of anger at the time. So in my life review, I got to re-experience some of his rageful outbursts. But there was a moment in my life review that really stood out to me where my brother and I were wrestling, and as kids, we loved WWE. And after we watched WWE, we would get up and, try to practice like we were the people that we saw on TV. These guys were superheroes to us. And there was this one time where my brother beat me in a wrestling match, and I was young and I got injured. So I screamed out for my dad. Long story short, my dad was not happy about that for a variety of reasons. And he brought my brother and I into his bedroom, where he closed the door behind us, and he grabbed my brother and he made me stand in the doorway watching as he beat my brother with the belt. And he made me watch, and then I had to get up. And by the time it was my turn to get beat with the belt, I was already crying and just terrified because I just had to watch my brother get beat with the belt. For my whole life, obviously, I hated my dad for that stuff, and I was terrified of him, and I could never forgive him for that stuff. But in my life review, because I had this ability to see it from his perspective, I got to see, number one, that he wasn't doing it to harm us. I mean, it was harming us, and it to this day, there's a lot of residual harm, but he wasn't trying to intentionally harm us. What his intention was to teach us and discipline and what he believed to be the right way of doing things. I got to see it from his viewpoint, and I got to feel that even he was unsure about his own behavior. He didn't know what he was doing. He thought he was doing the right thing because that's all he knew. That's all he had been exposed to. So that was a really big part of my life review. And by the end of my life review, I could understand, my father's reason for being that way. And it just gave me such a unique perspective on my father that I had the capabilities to forgive him by the end of my life review.
And just like we mentioned, you basically worked through a lot of the people that were closest to you in your life. So mum was next as part of the life review, and you openly share in your book that your mum had at times struggled with alcoholism as a single parent, going through a tough time trying to bring up two boys. And you say that within that, you had always had a level of blame towards her for maybe not being there as emotionally as she maybe should have been if she wasn't struggling so much. But then came a big realization after that through this different perspective. What was the big light bulb moment you got?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of my life review, after seeing what my mom had endured on her own, that was stuff I was unaware of as a child. I had no idea how much she was carrying. All I knew was just that we were struggling and that, like you said, emotionally, she wasn't there like I might have been wishing her to be. By the end of the life review, I realized how strong she was for me and my brother. And, alcohol was her way of dealing with her own pain. And at the time, I took it very personally and I blamed her. I was like, well, maybe it's my fault that she drinks alcohol. And then if I wasn't thinking that, I was thinking, well, it's her fault because she wants to drink alcohol and she doesn't want to be there for me. But by the end of my life review, I realized that none of that was true at all. That was all just stories that I told myself about her. And, at the end of my life review, all I wanted to do was just give her a really, really, really big hug and say thank you. Because without her, I mean, none of my baseball dreams would have come true. I wouldn't, none of this would have ever been possible up until that point without my mom just being so strong for us. So I was facing myself, the end of my life review. I realized that my life was over. I didn't have any more time left. I was looking at myself on the operating table and I was lying there without a heartbeat. And I had just realized in that moment of facing myself that, I had died full of regret. And my whole life, I hated myself. I hated myself for not being there for my mom more, for not saving her and trying to take her pain away. And I hated myself for not standing up to my dad on behalf of my brother. And I hated myself for taking life for granted in many, many ways. But at the end of my life review, it was followed by this compassion for myself. And, as hard as it was to die full of regret and face the reality that there was no time left to fix any of my wrongdoings or mistakes or I love yous never said or I'm sorry's never given, I could understand that in the same way that it wasn't my parents' intentions, it wasn't my dad's intention, it wasn't my mom's intention to harm me in these ways. It wasn't my own intention to die full of regret. To me, there was no God, no heaven. I thought death was the end, just darkness, a flat line, no more existence. But now, in the deepest part of the void, I needed God to be real, not to pull me out, but to give me a chance to do it right. God, please, I cried out, please give me a second chance. I know what I have to do now. I want to forgive them. I want to forgive myself. I'll face my addictions. I'll confront my fears. I'll stop numbing, stop hiding. I won't be a coward. I'll lead. I won't leave my potential on the shelf. I'll show up for the people I love. I'll live. I swear. I'll be present. I'll be true. Just let me go back. I paused, then let out a whisper, barely audible. I don't know if you're real. I'm sorry for never believing, but I need you now. Please, hear me. Please, don't let me go. I waited, but there was no voice, no light, no rescue, only silence. And so I sat there, suspended in that purgatory for what felt like forever, my soul unraveling, the threads of my existence fading one by one. A life unlived, potential untouched, love unspoken, alone, afraid, unready. Eventually, I let go. God, I surrender. The words slipped out like a final breath, cast into the void. No more fighting, no more begging, no more control. I accepted the truth. I wasn't in charge of what happened next. I braced myself for the end, for nothingness, for silence, for the final fade. And in that moment, when I released everything, something stirred. What happened next would change everything. Forever. After I surrendered and realized that I had no more time left, I was shuttled into this heavenly realm, for lack of a better term, where there were these refracted combinations of light forming this one universal divine color. It was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I'm in this place that I never really even believed in. I called it heaven. And this strange figure appears, and this strange figure passes me a basketball. And immediately I recognized this figure. It was my stepdad. His name was Mike. And the basketball game that we were now playing in heaven was actually a recreation of a real moment that happened on earth that I had just experienced in my life review. And, Mike was the savior of our family. He came in my life after the divorce where he helped us get out of poverty, and he treated my mom with such respect and care. And he stepped in at a time where I really needed a strong father figure, and he did that. So re-experiencing this basketball game in heaven was magical. And I think about it every day. Honestly, Mark, I think about it every day because of how powerful it was. And we play this basketball game for what feels like an eternity. And, it's just loving competition back and forth, a lot of fun. And at the end of the basketball game, the loving competition, the tone of the game changes. And he gets a little bit fatherly and stern with me. And he says, Bubba, I've been sent here to offer you something. He says, I know how badly you wanted that second chance after your life review. And he says, well, I've been here on behalf of a higher power to offer you that second chance. And then he says, but if I give you this second chance, you have a great purpose that you need to serve. And the next time that you die, you need to be ready for it. And even though he gave me a choice to stay in that realm, he gave me the offer. He said, you can stay here with me or you can go back. It didn't feel like I had much of a choice. It didn't really feel like even if I wanted to, it didn't feel like I could stay in that realm. And I mean, like I said, I think about that every single day, that interaction with him, because it showed me and it proved to me that God is real.
And as part of that conversation with Mike, I think at one point you asked him, well, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? What was his response?
Yeah. So I asked him, I said, what is my purpose? And then he basically said, the next time you die, you need to be ready for it. But he basically said, you're going to go on this journey to find out what your purpose is, but I can't tell you what it is. And that's what I did after that whole experience. Is I went on that search to find what it was.
Amazing. What an experience, man. So tell us how you came back to Earth. What happened?
So I woke up and I recalled the entire experience from start to finish, just like I kind of just recalled it to you. And I was on like the drugs that they had to use to revive me and such. So my mom, she's the person I told the story to. And because I was on the drugs, I told her the story front to back, and then she kind of dismissed it. She's like, no, silly, like it's just the drugs talking. Don't believe in that kind of thing. And there was this nurse who overheard me share that story with my mom. And she said, ma'am, uh, your son's not making this up. Like, I've heard about these things. I see them here all the time. They're called near-death experiences. You should look into them. And I heard that. And in the back of my mind, I was like, near-death experiences. I should look into them. So it did take me a long time to even accept the fact that I had this near-death experience, let alone share it and embrace it and, live into it. So before I did get to that point. The baseball dream ended up crumbling. I ended up getting injured again. Same injury. I re-injured the same ligament 10 months into my rehabilitation. And I just didn't love it the same. I just wasn't driven by that egoic drive to be the best anymore. And I'd lost that edge, I guess, in that sense. 3 years after my near-death experience was the first time I ever even shared that I'd had it, because in my head at the time, if I did actually have this near-death experience, which I did, but I was denying it, because if I did actually have it, it would force me to change all of my life, not just a little bit, not just the baseball dream, but who I was. And at the time, that was terrifying. So it took me 3 years to even get to the point to sharing it. And then after that, it was another 3 or 4 years after sharing it that I got to the point where I was ready to accept and embrace that great purpose that I was sent back to live out.
Yeah, and a cool part of your story and the integration process and really getting to grips with what happened in the aftermath of it was journaling. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
I was given this journal by my stepmom, and I didn't really care to write in it at all. In fact, I was kind of like mocking it. I was just making fun of this journal that I'd gotten, because I was tough. I was too tough to ever journal or talk about my feelings or anything like that. But up until that point, I had tried therapy a couple times. I tried to find other ways of dealing with these heavy emotions that I was carrying, and none of it worked for whatever reason. So I tried the journaling, and through the process of journaling each day, I ended up coming to the conclusion that, I did have this near death experience, and that I had a great purpose that I need to serve. But it helped me actually process the emotions associated with, holy crap, you know, I went in for surgery, and I was told I'll see him. I told my mom I'll see you in an hour, and then 15 minutes later I was there. And it's like, well, how does that happen so fast? How can that reality never really even occurred to me. So the journaling just gave me a really safe space to really deal with, like you said, the difficulties of integration.
There's one part in the journaling part of your book where you say you were journaling about life, you were journaling about death, but then also God. And you wrote in that chapter, which was strange because I had never believed in God, and now I was calling out to him.
Yeah, no, it was an accident. It was a complete accident. I had no intentions of ever developing a relationship with a higher power whatsoever, even after my experience. I mean, I was I guess you could call it an atheist my whole life, or maybe like agnostic atheist. I'm not sure what the label is, but I didn't really believe in anything, and I didn't really want to believe in anything, to be honest. And then I accidentally ran into these deeper thoughts in my journal, and I found that each journal entry I was addressing to this God, this God that I never really even believed in. And through that process, I developed a very, very, very close relationship with God, to where, now it's my whole reason for being, is to be connected to God and to stay connected to God. But before journaling, I would have never even come to those conclusions, because, what I felt like journaling did for me in relation to developing a relationship with God was it got me out of the way. It like got me out of my head and into my body and into the present moment, where I could really, really connect with God. And in the present moment is where I feel like most of us connect deepest with God. And that's kind of what happened.
So well said. And here comes the big question.
Yeah.
What are your feelings about death now?
It's so funny you asked that, Mark. Last night I have a nice little dock outside, and it was the super moon last night. And I was just looking at the moon, thinking about that question. What are my feelings about death now? I I don't fear death, number one. I think that death is our return home. And I feel like I was reflecting on it last night. Like, how would I die without regret this time around? And I think that in order to die without regret, um, we've got to make peace with the way that we live our life. So I feel like my relationship with death now is like this holistic view that includes life and death. I think that it's hard to look at death now without looking at life and how I'm living life. So, I mean, I could talk about death for days, but that's a general overview of it. Is I'm no longer afraid to die, and I'm ready to die whenever that time comes because I feel like it's my home.
Amazing. And how could you put into words what that experience meant to you and what it brought to you in your own life?
It was the best thing that's ever happened to me, um, in every single way possible. It was the best experience that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day for it just because of the it was very difficult to integrate, and it's still difficult every day to integrate because it's hard to make sense of this world when you see a world that makes so much sense and everything feels like it makes so much sense. And then you come back here and you're like, what is this? Like, what, this doesn't make any sense. Why do we all hate each other? And why are we all fighting? And it's given me such a perspective on life and appreciation for life that no matter what happens, I will always be grateful for what I have.
And it's often said that the greatest fear that people have is death. What would you say to someone watching this right now who that is the biggest fear for them?
That fear of death really held me back from living. And I don't say that to point fingers at anybody because death it's scary on the surface. You know, it's very scary on the surface, but I can promise the person who's watching this that number one, it's not scary. And number two, that's it's something that we can use to inspire us to live and inspire us to connect deeper and inspire us to be more present in our relationships and, you know, get off of our phones. And we can use death as a teacher, and we don't have to fear this teacher. We can respect this teacher and honor this teacher. And I think that in doing so, our life will drastically improve. And when the time comes to die, we won't be afraid because of how well we've lived.
And the baseball dream's gone.
Yeah, long
That's
gone.
been batted right out the park. What's the mission now? What's your plan going forward?
The mission now is to help people become ready to die. I mean, that's the title of my book. That is the umbrella through which I do everything else. The mediums through which I do that is I provide coaching. I'm going to continue writing books. I provide speaking. I provide mentorship, and I provide accountability to people that I work with on their journey to help them become ready to die. I'd like to at some point connect with more near-death experiencers. I'm manifesting that, putting that into the universe here, because I think that the near-death experience is very powerful, and I think that uh, the more we spread this word, maybe the more peace we can help other people attain. And ultimately, I think that's the goal for all of us in the near-death experience community. So that's something I'd like to work on too in the future. Is just bring more of a powerful message of helping people find peace in the future. So my website is bubbaherrick.com. My YouTube channel is The Real Bubba Herrick. And then my Instagram is Bubba Herrick Author.
I'll include all the links to that as well in the description below. And just for everyone watching, I bought my paperback copy. The book's just out, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
released. I got it in Kindle and then bought the paperback because it is so good. So
Thank
I'll
you.
include the link to that as well below.